Start. The culmination of the European Enlightenment was the guillotine. Not the one that severed France from its king and queen, but rather the one that separated ought from is. Presented with David Hume's weapon of execution and confronted by his trusty fork, one could no longer prove any sort of meaning in existence. Not from facts or theory alone, anyway. Yet, what is it about natural laws that shake our very core? Why is it that, in the arcs and spins of planets and stars, we find the answers to the biggest questions of life? I say this not to reprimand, nor to condescend. I too am guilty of this. Back. I say this, back, history. Back, history, auto, save, prefs. I say this not to reprimand, nor, even now, I still have not stopped using science as a guiding light even though it only points to where I want to go. In a world that lost the delightful fallacies of ages past, everyone needs to cling onto something. For me, it is the equations that govern the motions of the universe of quarks and galaxies alike. This is a story about motion. And in celebration of motion, I present to you 3 laws to hold near and dear. The first, inertia is a property of matter. That is to say, velocity stays constant in the absence of force. Whether stuck in one place or hurtling toward a wall, only by acting can we change our trajectory and shape our destiny. The second, matter accelerates in the direction of the applied force. Push to, pull fro. Actions do what actions do. No more, no less. Whether to hell or heaven, to riches or ruin, we go the way we are forced to go. By others' hands, or by our own. The third, last, and greatest one of all, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. By corollary, the net force of a system is 0. Push comes to shove. There are no free lunches. You get what comes to you. Cosmic karma exists, I am sure of it. Even without any possible proof, I cannot believe any other way. And that, in the end, is the beauty of Hume's guillotine. If no proofs exist, no proofs need be tendered. Modern problems require modern solutions. Off with the heads of those who dare tell me otherwise. We have no need for heads here, anyway. A story, in the end, is a matter of the heart. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. And in my old age, I at last have the heart to laugh. Click. Click. Back. History. Auto forward. Save. Previous file page. Save. File page auto. Save. Previous file page quick. File page 1 selected. File page 2. File page 3. File page 4. File page 5. File page 7. Next file page. Save slot 1. Empty slot. Save slot 1. Wednesday, November 30th, 2022 0058 selected. Save slot 2. Empty slot. Save slot 5. File. Previous. Save. Return. Quit. Return. Prefs. Save. Auto. History. Back. Click. I lowered the camera from my eye, and the instant film emerged. I slipped the undeveloped photograph into the front pocket of my laboratory coat. Only after several minutes would the image be clear enough to see. Until then, all there was to do was enjoy the silence of Trinity Great Court. Me. What a way to spend my first afternoon in the United Kingdom, I thought to myself. Before appreciating more than a glimpse of London, I had immediately flagged a taxi and headed out. Me. Back, me, back. Me. My first time in this country on this continent would be spent completing the task I had set out to do. Nothing more, nothing less. By then, I felt much too old to bother with fun and games. All work and no play had made me into a boring adult.
Oh wow, is that an actual Polaroid?
Back, oh, wow. Is that an actual Polaroid? Me. I turned around. A young man with stylish glasses approached me.
I've never seen one with my own two eyes.
And did those two sparkling eyes ever make me shy? There was also that alluring face and that bewitching accent.
If I can be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable on this topic.
How strange. Those things are pretty rare these days. But aren't all strangers just a little strange?
He hummed to himself and glanced me up and down. I tried and failed to hide in plain sight from his gaze.
I think you must be right around my age. Yet what an air you've got about you, huh?
Me. No point telling the young man that I was over 30 years old. The magic of why I appeared not a day past 20 could safely remain unstated.
Are you a Cambridge student? Faculty?
I shook my head.
Just visiting.
A tourist. From America, no less. Dressed in a white coat on a summer day. I've got to say, you really do stick out. A new sight, but a pleasant sight indeed.
Me. Back. His, auto, save, prep, me, back. Me. Did he fail to notice how my face reddened from his wink, or was he being a gentleman in not remarking on it?
I see you're taking shots around the school.
Yes, I tried to come when I was less busy.
Good timing. Now's a lazy time of day.
That it is.
I glanced at his book bag. As stylish as his glasses, and likely filled with coarse notes.
How humbling it must be to study at the alma mater of so many great men of history.
Puts on some extra pressure, that's for sure.
He looked out at the largest courtyard in Europe and pointed at nowhere in particular.
Just think, that's where Sir Newton might have sat. He studied here at Trinity, you know.
Me. Back, me. I knew that already, but held my tongue. There was a joke to be made about a Trinity College alumnus not believing in the Trinity, but I did not know how to make it.
In Neville's court he found the speed of sound. The northern cloister stands right to this day.
Incredible.
Unfortunately, Newton's results left much to be desired. There was no way of measuring time with sufficient accuracy, and he did not take into account the sound energy dispersed into heat. But it was the thought that counted. And in accordance with that long tradition, I did not interject with those details.
At Cambridge Newton stayed for decades long. He studied, taught, and wrote Principia.
He gave so much to this place.
And Cambridge cherished Newton in return. Lucasian Chair and Master of the Mint, small titles for a man like him, but still. I wonder what he'd say about this school, if somehow we could bring him back to life.
I wonder.
but it was not about Newton that I wondered.
I take it you were a student of physics? Or maybe of mathematics?
History. Can't do sums to save my life. Enthusiasm blesses not the man. But masters seldom make the greatest fans. They never see the magic in the gaps.
Me. As unexpected as his answer was in more ways than were immediately evident, I swallowed my surprise and shrugged with a smile.
I feign no hypotheses.
As pitiful as it sounds, that was the most I had ever spoken casually to someone outside of work. Though a part of me wanted to continue the conversation, I knew that it could get risky if it went on much further. Since if he saw the developed photograph.
But anyway, I'm almost late for class. Could I snap one of you before I go?
I blinked and did a double take.
I beg your pardon?
Or maybe of the two of us together. A souvenir for me to keep of you.
I tried to think of a believable reason for turning him down. Maybe I could say that I ran out of film. Me. But I did not have the heart to firmly reject his request, as impossible as it was to accede. I tried to think of a believable reason for turning him down. Maybe I could say that I ran out of film. Me. But I did not have the heart to firmly reject his request, as impossible as it was to accede. Cambridge student. Before I could come up with a good excuse, the student cleared his throat.
On second thought, forget I ever asked. The film for that must cost a fortune, yeah? Since Polaroid has long been out of business.
I sighed, equally relieved and remorseful.
I am sorry.
And I truly was. The problem was not money, but rather secrecy. But right as he mumbled a few parting pleasantries and turned to go, I stopped him.
Out of curiosity, why did you want to take a picture of me?
He glanced back with a somewhat subdued air.
I'm not so sure. It came to mind is all. But if I had to, how would I respond?
He furrowed his eyebrows, searching for the right answer. After carefully choosing his words, he replied.
What are we if not piles of memories? And on the day they fade, do we not die?
Me. I stared at him, stunned by his eloquence. He rubbed the back of his neck and shrugged.
And plus I dabble in photography. But that's a boring answer, don't you think?
Me. Cambridge student. With that, he walked off. When he was gone, I pulled out the partially developed photograph from my front pocket. Me. The image was of a courtyard full of young men walking and talking, enjoying a sunny afternoon. Their attire was characteristic of 17th century England, almost like they were on the set of a period drama. The picture offended my sensibilities. My own perspective of the past was devoid of vibrant hues and tones. I understood that the students of Trinity College from 400 years ago lived with color all around them, but my brain was in revolt. Even as part of the team that built this camera, something inside me doubted that the scene depicted was truly of the past. But that was indeed a picture of students from centuries ago, of people now long gone, of people whose grandchildren were also long gone. It was a precious record of the prime of countless youths, studying at one of the world's oldest universities at a time without electricity, women's rights, or a concrete understanding of gravity. Yet, in spite of its momentous value, I held it up and squinted, scanning all the faces in the picture. Me. None of them looked like Isaac Newton, I thought. Not that I knew what his face looked like in his student days. Time was of the essence. I recalibrated the camera settings and raised it to my eye once again. Click. Click. Back. Click. Click. Back. History. Auto forward. Save. File page 3. Save slot 1, Wednesday no, save, are you sure you want to overwrite your save? Save slot 1, yes. Save. Click. No matter where I was on this lonely planet, I felt at ease so long as I had my personal library, especially my complete sets of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis and the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling, and my deep love of science. Both are gifts I received from Greg. Though, upon reflection, only the books were by his intention. Those two epic heptalogies, considered solely juvenile reading material by non-magicians, give me a strange sense of awe even in my adulthood. As a child curious about what lay outside my family's secluded hilltop castle, those two classics were to blame for my wild fantasies of saviors teleported from another plane or of an orphaned chosen hero at a magical boarding school. Sadly, no one ever came to deliver me from my restlessness, and my parents took charge of my education rather than sending me off to an academy somewhere, magical or otherwise. Though I am thankful to my parents for tolerating my fascination with non-magical literature, back then I wished that they were more like the many magicians who decide to live in mainstream human communities and enroll their children in public schools. Sadly, there was no longer any endangered Narnia to be saved, nor any whimsical Hogwarts to be explored. As much as one might wish that reality may make room for fiction, it seemed that magical adventures would never come my way. Luckily, even the small sphere of reality around me was filled to the brim with other worthwhile pursuits, and Father was more than happy to help sate my natural curiosity with the help of our esteemed guests. Though I can hardly be considered an expert on non-magical culture and customs, I can confidently assure any sheltered magical readers that everyone I have met in the outside world would be shocked to hear that magicians often keep scientists as their closest companions. There was no greater honor to the oldest magical households than to host professors and researchers of the sciences, and to lend assistance through whatever means available, whether that be offering funds from the ancestral coffers or producing rare and expensive materials through magical manipulation. As dismissive and indifferent as he was of the practices of other magical families, Father could not help but also be fond of the company of these accomplished pedagogues and pioneers. Not that anyone else minded these warm friendships. Their frequent visits kept days fresh and lively, and it gave purpose to Mother's meticulous decoration of our large residence. My best childhood memories were of sitting with Father and his companions while Mother would toil with dinner preparations. The looks on the faces of those men when they discussed new discoveries and technological advancements convinced me that I would one day join them as equals. Of course, there was still much to learn. And though Father would try to teach me all he could about science, he himself was only an amateur when it came to rigorous explanations for how everything worked. Moreover, he too would struggle to follow along the more complex topics. A hobbyist could seldom pretend to true expertise, in the end. It was Greg who would lean into my ear and whisper explanations for whatever was going on. I often could not understand them, but I would nod and conceal my giddiness at being afforded special attention by a grown-up. And sometimes, if the conversation became overly technical, he would excuse himself and take me out to the garden, where he patiently addressed my most pressing inquiries. "Why do I fall after I jump?" I asked while bouncing around on one such occasion. "Who made up that rule?" He patted my head, and I was stayed. "I'm not sure if anyone made it up, sweetie." That was when he answered one of the oldest of scientific questions by repeating one of the greatest stories in scientific history. He told me about Newton and the apple that changed everything, and I hanged on his every word. "Sweetie." Unlike father and mother, who spoke to me with refined and reserved distance, Greg treated me as a child, his child. Back then, I thought that non-magical children must have been so lucky to have such warm parents. It was only after leaving my bubble that I learned that this sort of genuine kindness and understanding toward children was a rarity everywhere. For every one Diggory Kirk out there, there was another Vernon Disley. In Narnia and on Earth, between wizards and among muggles, there are better and worse parents. When I asked Mother how she and Father had chosen Greg as my godfather, she answered that they had seen how much he loved his own daughter. It bothered me that there was another that Greg doted on, but I decided that it was such a lovely thing that two girls could be made so happy by one man. And the idea that I had an older sister of sorts somewhere out in the world, who was also trying her hardest to become a scientist, only increased my burning desire of joining her and Greg one day. Alas, the bloodline covenant dictated that the head of the family can never leave the ancestral grounds. I, as Father's only child, was bound to live the same life that he lived, confined within the perimeter of the family property, watching as his servants and friends left and entered the front gates as they wished. No matter how many magical adventures and scientific inquiry beckoned to me, I would remain a mere observer, researching the familial magical arts from day to day and forcing myself to be satisfied with only books and chats with visitors, through which I would vicariously live a free life. I would be arranged to marry a second or third son from another family, selected for their strong affinity to magic and their sensibilities regarding the outside world. With time to consider the idea, I might come to accept him and love him as my husband. By his sire, I would conceive a healthy firstborn, and would raise them as my eventual successor. For the rest of my long life, my greatest duty would be to perfectly perform my purpose to ensure my genetic and magical lineage, to stay within the stony walls. On my deathbed in the master bedroom, after the usual 200 or so years of a magician's life, I would see the same ceiling that my predecessors had seen. I would be the seventh in a line of respected heads who would never see past the end of the path leading out the gate, down the hill, through the forest, and away to places forever outside my reach. That was how my life was supposed to go. That was the fate from which I ran away. After leaving the castle and breaking the centuries-long covenant of Father's bloodline, I had immersed myself in the knowledge of the outside world. A part of me had believed that the whole notion of the internet was just a cruel joke that adults tell children, in the same vein as ghost stories and tall tales. But it was real, and as much of a near-infinite wellspring as everyone had made it out to be. Besides playing around with the devices that Father's guests had brought to show my family, I had never learned to use a computer or a smartphone. I could never have imagined that the millions of tomes equivalent of knowledge on an old hard drive could be dwarfed by the torrent of data flooding each and every second through a fiberglass cable connection. With 11 billion people scouring the internet for fresh content, the daily tabloids and cat videos posted in a single year made up hundreds of exabytes, and was quickly nearing the zettabytes. With the sheer volume of information available, it was a miracle that it could all be indexed by search engines, the boatman who ferried me to mystical lands within milliseconds. After getting my first laptop, a MacBook, a most delectable forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, many days and nights were spent on Google, searching any and all questions that popped into my head. It was during that sleepless period that I learned, in an article about Isaac Newton's life and legacy, that the oft-repeated Apple story was apocryphal. The main source, I gathered, was Catherine Barton, Newton's beautiful niece, who provided directly to Voltaire that famous account about her uncle. And though I wanted to trust that she was telling the truth, it was wishful thinking to believe that a popular socialite could not spin a tale now and then. This all came to mind as I strolled outside Woolsthorpe Manor, the birthplace and family residence of Isaac Newton. Me. After trying and failing to get a good shot of Newton at work indoors, all that was left was outdoors. It was said that it was from the branches of the tree in the garden that an apple fell. If it did ever happen, it must have been during those precious years away from Cambridge, while Europe was afflicted by the bubonic plague. A fence surrounded the tree's perimeter, preventing visitors from sitting under it like Newton might have. How lonely it must be to be cordoned from the world with a wooden enclosure that did no justice to its timeless majesty. Me. Seeing the formidable plant that had stood proudly for centuries, outlasting the pitiful lifespans of noble men and vast kingdoms, I thought of those verses penned by Lord Byron. When Newton saw an apple fall, he found in that slight startle from his contemplation. 'Tis said, for I'll not answer above ground for any sage's creed or calculation, a mode of proving that the earth turned round in a most natural whirl, called gravitation. And this is the sole mortal who could grapple, since Adam, with a fall or with an apple. Man fell with apples, and with apples rose. If this be true, for we must deem the mode in which Sir Isaac Newton could disclose through the then unpaved stars the turnpike road, a thing to counterbalance human woes. For ever since immortal man hath glowed with all kinds of mechanics, and full soon steam engines will conduct him to the moon. Me. While I silently appreciated the poetic weight of the serene stage before me, one that rivaled even the paradise left behind by man's exile from Eden, a family of 4 also approached the fence. The father grinned at his wide-eyed son and daughter and pointed at the tree. Forced to eavesdrop, I noticed their American accents.
It was while sitting right there that an apple hit Mr. Newton right on the head. And what did he say?
Eureka!
Woman. The 2 children's proud mother beamed and linked arms with her husband. Meanwhile, I adjusted the exposure on my camera. Click. Back. History. Auto. Save. File, file, next file, save slot 1, save, are you, save slot 1, yes. Save. Click.
Excuse me, miss. Could you take a photo for us?
Me. Save. Me. Me. Woman. Me. Realizing a beat late that she was talking to me, I met the mother's eye and mustered a polite response.
Here, let me give you my phone. 1 second.
He produced a flip phone from his pocket and handed it to me.
Do you know how to use it?
Me. He
Here,
produced a
let me
flip
give you
phone
my
from his
phone.
pocket and
1
handed it to
second.
me.
Do you know how to use it?
Me. With no more reason to refuse, I accepted their request.
I can figure it out.
After some fiddling around, I took 5 pictures of the family. First picture. First picture. Back. History. Auto forward. History. Back. First picture. The first was by accident. Second picture. Back. Second picture. Back. History. Auto forward. History. Back. Second picture. The second was out of focus. Third picture. Back. History. Auto forward. Save. Auto forward. History. Back. Third picture. The third was slanted. Fourth picture. And the fourth was great. Fifth picture. The fifth, I took just in case. Back. The fifth, I took just in case.
My jaw hurts from smiling.
Shush now, she did us a big favor.
But Mommy, they're just photos.
They're not just photos, dear. They're mementos.
Mentos? Like the things you put into Coke?
No, silly, like frozen memories. Snapshots in time that fit in the palm of your hand.
I want to hold them. Can I hold them, Mommy?
Of course, dear. But first, what do we say to the kind stranger?
Girl. The young girl stepped forward and spoke with upturned eyes. Girl.
Thank you for the memories.
Me. Was I ever as adorable as her? A smile crept onto my face, and there I allowed it to stay.
The pleasure is mine.
Girl. Woman. I gave the flip phone to the girl, who excitedly brought it to her mother. Her father, meanwhile, laughed to himself.
Can you believe Nokia still sells models without design?
I had no idea.
The lens and the software are new, but there's still something nice about holding on to a piece of the past. But I'm preaching to the choir. You seem to like vintage technology yourself.
I wiped away a speck of dust off the top of the camera.
There is a certain charm to it, yes.
Just then, I felt a tug on my laboratory coat.
Excuse me, you dropped this.
Me. I looked over and saw the boy holding a Polaroid print. Me. Rather hastily, I took it back and stuffed it into my back pocket. Me. Man.
Son, what did I say about touching things that aren't yours?
But it was on the ground.
Me. I, noticing that I was holding my breath, exhaled slowly. He did not see anything, I convinced myself.
He is right. That was my own fault.
I bent down and put a hand on the boy's shoulder.
Thank you. You are a nice child.
Boy.
It fell because of gravity, you know.
Man. The man shrugged and put his hands on his son's shoulders.
They've been interested in science ever since watching Bill Nye.
Me. I did not know who that was, but nodded with a knowing expression.
The older one said he wants to become a scientist, do research in a lab somewhere.
In outer space.
Yes, in outer space.
As if to find his son's future workplace, the man looked up at the sky.
Pushing humanity forward is great and all, but you know what I think? Young people need to learn to look back first. Only then can we all be ready for the challenges up ahead. The future will always be out there waiting for us, so it would do some good for everyone to slow down and think about the past. The way I see it, why give up on old magic for new science before at least trying to keep both?
Me. Little did he know that among those who willingly relinquished magic for science, I was the worst of them all. After some more idle talk, I learned that they were Canadians visiting family in Lincolnshire. We parted ways. As they headed to the farmhouse, the boy spoke to his parents loudly enough for me to overhear.
Luckily, the photo didn't hit anyone, or else they'd yell Eureka, just like Newton did.
Me. Catherine's fib lives on. I mused while walking to the parking lot. Fact is often weirder than fiction, but weirdness is hardly a mark of craftsmanship. And well-crafted fiction wins against fact whenever and wherever we seek not the latter. As much as I wanted to stay around longer, there were still other places to be. Newton was only one of many giants in a long line of scientists. The past held more mysteries than could ever be recorded with even 10 or 100 times the film I had left. Moreover, the taxi fare was adding up. Though I had no better uses for my money, I preferred if the driver would put those idle fees to good use. Maybe he has a wife and 2 children, a happy family like the one visiting Woolsthorpe. Not that I was about to pry into his personal life. Politely enduring his erratic turning and braking, I flipped through all the shots I had taken at the manor. Me. None stood out to me. Newton did in the kitchen and dining hall as one would expect, and I had refrained from invading the privacy of his bedroom. The most noteworthy of the photographs was one of Isaac's first moments, when he was still a wailing newborn clinging to his mother. But of course, that image of Newton was no more than trivia, an accessory to the man he would become. It too was met by my disinterest, and was put aside. It would not be until I was at a hotel that night that I remembered the one shot I had taken of the apple tree. When a damaged picture fell out of my back pocket, I recalled that I had been distracted by the family at Woolsthorpe Manor. Me. Oh well, I thought as I picked it off the floor. That was the price of my carelessness. Ready to dispose of yet another dud, I examined the photograph of the apple tree. Me. I gasped upon making out 2 figures under its shade. A middle-aged man was speaking excitedly to a little girl on his lap, enrapturing her with the apple in the palm of his hand. Though I can never prove it, I am convinced that it was the moment where a young Catherine heard from her Uncle Isaac that the laws of the universe literally hit him on the head. She did not lie to Voltaire after all. Instead, she spoke her truth right into reality itself, blessing history with an anecdote rivaling the second chapter of Genesis in splendid grandeur. Me. I sniffed, sensing something rising from my chest to my nostrils. As soon as I arrived in Bern the next day, I made a detour en route to my destination, the Swiss Federal Institute of Intellectual Property, where Einstein worked as a patent clerk, and found a print shop. A blonde Swiss girl helped me package and ship a single high-quality print of the photograph to my apartment in America. As much as I wanted for someone else to appreciate the weight of that image, the bubbly employee humming to herself would not understand. Also, the guys back at the laboratory would give me an earful if they found out I was disclosing confidential information. Oh well, I thought as I waved her goodbye. Those secrets were more fun to share than to keep, there was always a time and a place. While Father's friends would all stay in the guest bedrooms during their visits, only Greg had his own designated quarters. At some point, he became an evergreen part of the family. Increasingly, he would eschew his duties as the director of a prestigious research institute and spend weeks in our castle, discussing his latest project with Father. It was fine that he did so, despite not even the President of the United States knowing the details. Father gave his honorable word, and privileged information about the magical world in exchange. Thinking about it now, Greg was getting a good deal. Father valued honor more than life, and it was not as if there was any reason for a recluse like him to involve himself in the politics of non-magicians. Maybe Father knew this, and simply enjoyed talking about his world to his best friend. Surely he, like everyone else, relished the chance to speak about themselves to an attentive listener. And listen Greg did. He was certainly both more knowledgeable about and more interested in magic than I ever was. In fact, what little Father passed on to me was only mastered thanks to the encouragement of my godfather, who would oversee my daily practice. This is so boring, I groaned while practicing anti-aging charms on my bed. If only I could learn how to make a fireball. I can only imagine what you would do with a new power like that. Greg smirked and closed the tattered book on his lap. It's a shame that magicians are the ones quickest to abandon their craft. You wouldn't believe how much people pay to grow back their hair and hide their wrinkles. When he touched his thinning scalp and laughed, crow's feet appearing around his eyes. Greg was decades younger than Father, yet looked decades older. Despite Father nearing 80, he appeared about the same age as a non-magical 30-year-old thanks to a combination of health and beautification magic. As he, like other heads of magical families, was loath to develop and pass on any magic rendered obsolete by science, those anti-aging charms were the only forms he had taught me, his intended heiress. But science is cooler. I hopped off my bed and danced around the room, arms spread like wings. Being able to fly without any incantations or potions is awesome. When scientists figure out how to slow down aging, I will have no need for magic at all. Greg stood up from the chair and looked out the window at the well-tended garden below. I still remember when your mother would present the most marvelous creations at dinner time. I did, too. When guests were over, she used to oversee meal preparations rather than leave it up to the family chef and his assistants. Using her own family's magic-assisted recipes, she would serve the most incredible dishes, meat roasts cooked uniformly inside and out, soups that changed flavor, desserts that sparkled like stars and melted on the tongue. Though dinner guests had ecstatically given their compliments to the lady of the house, Father would firmly rebuke her in private. We must be sensible ambassadors of magic, I had heard him say. Magic is not to be used frivolously. Mother had protested that even the latest gastronomical technologies could not compare to the magical techniques passed on by her own mother, but her defense had only become less emboldened over time. And one day, her frivolous use of magic had stopped completely. A world without your mother's desserts is a sad one. Greg turned to me. One day, you'll look back on your childhood and cherish the most meaningless things, the most magical things. His shimmering eyes, his unshaven lip, his tired demeanor. It had been a while since Greg mentioned his beloved daughter, since he treated me with his former tenderness. By mother's firm instructions, I was not to pry into his family matters. If only he and his daughter would make up soon, I thought. Though it would mean he would be with her instead of by my side, I could only selfishly wish that Greg might retrieve the happiness that he once selflessly shared with me. The more tortured Greg was by his scientific pursuits, the more terrified he became of his work, the farther my goal of helping him and his daughter uncover the secrets of the universe escaped from my 2 hands. One day, he left our castle for the last time, having announced to father his resolution to abandon everything for his research. Guests were no longer invited after that. It seemed that father had picked favorites between his friends. With no way to contact the outside world, I grew restless. Home, more than ever before, became my prison, my parents, my jailers. When I ran away many years later, I learned that Dr. Gregory Clarence Keller, director of the Social Simulation Institute, had died 3 years ago under suspicious circumstances likely related to the political gravity of his work. Less than 2 years later, his young successor followed in his footsteps, also succumbing to the evils of the world in her 20s. I wonder if Greg's daughter, before joining her father in death, knew that I was out there, locked up in an old hilltop castle, sustaining myself with the conviction that I would escape and join my long-lost father and sister. I wonder if Dr. Samantha Keller expected that a young maiden she never met would cry at her grave and apologize for not being brave enough to follow them. I, that cowardly 17-year-old, slumped to my knees and wept, my tears shimmering glass apples in the light of the setting autumnal sun. But like man exiled from Eden, I overcame the fall. I stood up and dried my eyes with the back of my hand. Soon, the saline moisture on my cheeks would evaporate. Wisps of water vapor would rise toward the heavens, overcoming gravity's pull and soaring up to the clouds above. Fall would give way to winter, and winter to spring. So I bravely rose, as did the morning sun every day in the 13 years thereafter. When I was back in America, I made one final stop with the camera. No one on my team opposed my decision. Not that anyone was in a position to oppose me. The entire project depended on me, my endless funds, and my magical artifact. Besides, they were too distracted by the suitcases of film I had brought back. That would keep them busy as I attended to my private matters. The car ride from the airport took 5 hours. My escort, a balding scientist, talked the entire time.
I'll have you know, I loathed going to your place back in the day. The drive took forever, and not being able to send texts or check my email almost drove me crazy. But wow, is the view ever something? Almost makes it all worth it.
Me. I nodded and smiled, but said nothing. My default setting in situations like these. After we steered down a lush forest path, the GPS stopped working. I had no idea where we were, but the driver knew the way by heart. He had seen the forest many more times than me, having visited twice a year with his father. Back then, how could I have known that he would become such an important colleague and mentor in the years to come? How could I have known that he had seen the forest many more times than me, having visited twice a year with his father? Back then, he was a nervous graduate student while I was still a child. How could I have known that he would become such an important colleague and mentor in the years to come? We had both grown up so much since those days.
Are you sure this was not too much trouble for you?
You asked that already.
Sorry.
No worries. You must be tired.
Yes, I must be.
When I had found myself alone in the non-magical world, it had been through the help of those who knew father that I made it. Among them had been those who saw me as a ticket to my family's wealth. And, I am ashamed to say, I fell for the ruses of many who sought to exploit my position as heiress. Though, even after I became more jaded in my views and more prudent in my interactions, I still could not avoid work relationships with opportunists. Such is life.
Never be afraid to make use of me. Never be afraid to make use of me.
Among them had been those who saw me as a ticket to my family's wealth. And, I am ashamed to say, I fell for the ruses of many who sought to exploit my position as heiress. Though, Even after I became more jaded in my views and more prudent in my interactions, I still could not avoid work relationships with opportunists. Such is life.
But does your wife really have nothing to say about it?
She's fine.
Was she not angry about your overtime hours?
Nah, that wasn't a problem. She was pissed about me spending time with a pretty young lady at work.
A pretty young lady?
Who else but you?
Me. Me. The blood rushed to my cheeks as I struggled to maintain an even tone.
That is quite a terrible misunderstanding.
Yeah, it was a whole ordeal. But after she talked with you at the last Christmas party, all suspicions were dispelled.
I beg your pardon. I do not understand.
Me. I was completely mystified. Non-magical adults know, perhaps all adults were incomprehensible beasts. But who was I to talk?
All you need to know is that I'll help out where I can. You're like a little sister to me, you know?
Am I?
Sure, a little sister who covers my rent and groceries.
Me. I blushed again, this time with a different feeling, a better one.
Please remind me to give you paid leave when this is all over.
Much appreciated. But when is science ever over?
Me. In a dog-eat-dog world, I was lucky enough to find trustworthy allies. As much as they were few and far between, each oasis was a precious reprieve. Through how many grains of sand did one have sifted one by one before finding but a single safe haven in the desert? Me. Escort. We arrived at the gates some time later. My steps were tentative when I opened the door and stepped out. Me. I glanced over. My companion was still in the car, adjusting his seat to lie flat. He kicked back, put his arms behind his head, and closed his eyes.
I'll just take a nap. You run along now.
Me.
Thank you.
Escort. His bonus was all but signed. After giving a nod that he could not see, I went ahead by myself. Me. Hesitating for a moment, I pushed against rusted metal. The gate creaked open, its magical locks long disabled. The front door allowed my passage just as easily, leading me into the home I had abandoned 13 years ago. Me. This time, I expected the emptiness that greeted me. Last time, the first and only other time, this exact scene with less dust and mold had greeted the prodigal daughter who had returned after several long months alone in non-magical society. Even now, I do not know what became of my parents. Are they in hiding? Living under assumed identities, no longer wanting anything to do with the child who abandoned her role? But would they really make no effort to find the girl they birthed and raised, even if she was an unforgivable covenant breaker? After leaving a note bequeathing the family estate to me as some sort of parting gift, did they really vanish and seclude themselves somewhere outside the reach of the world's best private eyes? The likely, unspeakable answer was obvious. But only now, while writing this account, can I finally grieve. That second time I went back to the castle, I might have still had hope in my heart. With the camera, I took pictures all around the house, trying to find clues. Click. Save slot 2, empty slot. Save slot 1, Wednesday, December 7. Save, are you sure you want to overwrite your save? Save slot 1, yes. Save. Previous file, save. Return, save. File, 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 page 8. Next, save slot 1, Wednesday, January 18th, 2023, 21:27 selected. Click. The temporal gem, the single artifact I had recovered from Father's collection, had shown me the path forward in the scientific world and had guided me in harnessing its forbidden magic. Click. Back. History. Click. Then, as the engine powering this device that could peer into the past, the gem was my last shot at uncovering the truth, at getting closure. Click. Me. This has to work, I thought. It just has to. But after spreading out the instant film on the dining table, I could only laugh to stave off the incoming sobs. Me. Back. Me. Prefs. Save. Auto forward. History. Back. Me. History. Auto forward. Me. In those half-developed pictures, there were not only no hints regarding my parents, but no traces of any magic whatsoever. No signs of alchemical experiments in Father's study, of culinary sorcery in Mother's kitchen, nor of beginner's charms practice in my bedroom. It was as if the magic of the past had been overridden or sealed away, hidden from my scientific eye set on concrete answers. In those still images, we were just a normal family. Father chatted with his friends, Mother served dinner to the guests, I ran around the garden under Greg's watchful eye. Me. The last photograph to fully develop, the one for which I was least prepared, was one of my parents alone together. Father was gazing out a window at the forest outside the gate. Mother had her arm around his, as if comforting someone in mourning. Me. My heart ached. Somehow, it only then occurred to me that my parents truly loved each other. Father was confined to the castle, and Mother stayed there by his side. Together, they cradled a baby and raised her into a little girl. That girl loved Narnia and Harry Potter, got bored easily, asked too many questions, clung on to adults, and could not wait to grow up. And grow up she did, into a rebellious teenager who felt trapped by the walls and gates of tradition. That young woman departed without a goodbye, in search of new frontiers. Having found them, she stumbled back to the place she had left to die. My time in non-magical society had armed me with so much knowledge, but knowledge has a habit of disarming those who happen upon it. Rather than reveal the secrets of the universe, science simply gave me new ways to rationalize and accept my new fate. Me. What was there, beyond Newton's laws of motion? Beyond classical mechanics, beyond the standard rules of reality, beyond good and evil? Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the mathematical inequality limiting our best guesses of position and momentum, the calculated injustice of a world where we lose sight of either where we are, or where we must go. Caught up in what I wanted, I was blind to what was mine. Then, unable to forget what was lost, I could no longer find my way. How convinced I was that I could be absolutely sure about everything. I was nothing but a know-it-all who got what was coming to her. Gödel's incompleteness theorems, no formal axiomatic system can be both complete and consistent. And so, unruly and unworthy humanity with or without God is stuck being either powerless or irrational. Who was I, to yearn for a scientific future? Who was I, to choose which way to pull the lever? And who am I now, to despair over a magical past now lost? But what is the past, and what is the future? Even if they exist outside imagination, how can we hope to move either way? So many years to my life were devoted to unknowable truths, to unsolvable problems. Clarke's third law, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But what if there were, in theory, sufficiently advanced magic that technology could never match? I was doomed, am still doomed to never know. I had already made my choice. No matter what, I am stuck in the present, right at the cusp of possibility and impossibility. 30 years it took me to see the simple truth. My pilgrimage ended there, when I accepted that the present was the only place in history I will ever be am ever meant to be. Me. I was ready to grow up. I was ready to move on. Once my crying stopped, I got up from the table and raised my hand. Me. Closing my eyes tight, I channeled my mana for the last time. Cast Dispel Magic. Prefs. Cast back. Cast Dispel Magic. With a simple wave, I removed my anti-aging charms. Instantly, an immense weight lifted off my shoulders. Me. Back. Me. Prefs. Me. Back. History. Auto. Say. Pref. Me. Stranded in the lonely present, 100 years is more than plenty. FIN. Studio Madeline Chai. Presents. Start.